Frollo is the app that several thousand single parents say has been life-changing for them in the most profound way. If you're a single parent and want to connect with other single parents and open yourself up to an amazing support network and new experiences, then the Frollo app is the one for you. The Frollo app has two modes: community mode for meetups and holidays, guidance and support, chats, and discovery to make it easy to find like-minded local single parents near you. Dating mode is a mindful, safe, and respectful dating offering where everybody is there to date another single parent. All users on Frollo are verified, putting our user safety first always. The Frollo app is free to download and use, with the option to upgrade to premium for access to lots of additional premium features for an elevated experience, which makes it easier than ever to access the incredible connections and experiences you're looking for. To download Frollo, search for Frollo, Frollo, on the App or Google Play Store, or go to www.frollo.com for more info. We can't wait to see you on the app soon. Hi, I'm Zoe Desmond, the founder of Frollo, the award-winning app for single parents that features both community and dating modes. And I'm also co-author, along with my wonderful friend Rebecca Cox, that I made through Frollo, of the book How to Be a Happy Single Parent. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Frollo podcast. Today I am joined by the lovely Rebecca Seal. Rebecca is an acclaimed author of 12 cookbooks, I think it is, and a couple of other bestsellers. And Rebecca, welcome to the Frollo podcast. And I would love to just kind of jump in by giving you the floor to tell us a bit about you and all of these amazing things that you're doing.
Thanks. That's a really nice intro. Thank you for having me. So, I'm a freelance journalist and author, and I have a weird career, which I find hard to explain. So I'm sure people find it hard to work out what it is that I do. But about 50% of my time I'm writing about food. So I write cookbooks and I write articles about food related stuff that could be anything from sustainability to fat phobia, diabetes, all sorts of things along those lines. And then back in 2019, I wrote a book called Solo, How to Work Alone and Not Lose Your Mind, which I thought was just going to be a book for a few freelancers. And then it came out in 2020, which was a slightly different vibe, and became a rather bigger thing and a much bigger part of my working life than I'd expected, and has led me to write a lot more around mental health and well-being, and sort of personal development, although I don't know how properly I fall into that category, because quite a lot of what I write about is about rejecting that kind of thing. And rejecting some of the sort of tropes of self-help and, the notion that we can hack ourselves into being a perfect human, which I am thoroughly against. Then the latest book that I've published in that area is called Be Bad Better, How Not Trying So Hard Will Set You Free. And that came out in December. And it's been a bit of a wild ride since then, as it always is, publishing a book. And so what I'm sort of talking about in that is about the things that we get, the messages we get through culture, and through society that tell us certain aspects of our personhood or our bodies are bad, and why those things are not bad at all, but are in fact sort of vital, valuable, often beautiful parts of being a completely normal but imperfect human.
Amazing. There is so much to jump into. three very different areas, and interested in kind of going a bit deeper in all three. But just to understand a bit more about you personally and why you were led to each of these areas. What was it that kind of opened up these avenues for you?
Well, the food stuff, I think, came from years of working in restaurants when I was much younger. I did about 7 years working front of house and going out with chefs and that kind of thing. And then my first job in journalism was on Observer Food Monthly magazine, and I was there for 6 years. So I spent a long time kind of in the food world, reading other people's recipes, editing recipes, working on food shoots, and kind of absorbing and learning as much as I could. And so when I went freelance, one of the first things I did was write a cookbook. I also edited a food magazine for the Soho House Group, and then a drinks magazine for them too. So that's how that all came about. And I always really loved it. But I did sort of have this yearning to do some other stuff as well. I didn't really know what, but I had this sense that I wanted to kind of address other questions about life. And so I think that's what took me in the direction of writing solo. But I mean, fundamentally, that came about because I burned myself out really badly. Once I went freelance, I just put my head down and worked and said yes to absolutely everything. And simultaneously was going through IVF and kind of dealing with the personal fallout for all of that, the challenges that it places on a relationship, and and then having very, very small children. So I was just a bit of a mess, frankly, in about 2014, which was when I first had the idea for the book, and why it took me 5 years to get to a point where I was able to actually put the brain power into writing it, because I was very, very, very lonely and very, very, very burned out and overworked. And had very, very small children. So essentially felt like I was going mad and the world was falling apart. So it took me a while to get to a point where I could write the book, but then also write about it. So a lot of the book writing stuff that I do is quite personal. Like, I like to have everything I say backed up by data and research and interviews, but it often does follow a thread that my life has followed. And I think that's because I'm quite like a lot of people. I think I'm very driven and I'm a perfectionist, but often that has really, really negative consequences for
Yeah.
our ability to feel joy and to parent as we want to parent and all of that stuff. So that's often a sort of thread that runs through the writing that I do.
Amazing. And with the with God, what a timely book that it came out in. So it actually came out in 2020.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, you couldn't have timed that any better if you tried. So yeah, actually, up until then, I used to work in a co-working space, and obviously that all changed then in lockdown, and worked from home. And the Frollo team were a remote first, flexible working. So, everyone is sort of riding solo in that respect. But yeah, I'd love to learn more about some of what comes up in the book, or any tips or tricks, especially as it's so relevant to so many people these days, because everything's changed with that aspect of work, and remote working is so much more normal now. But also for single parents, it's kind of a necessity, flexible remote working as well for a lot of people, especially given childcare costs. So I just wondered if there's any kind of tips and tricks you can share to how to look after our mental health and feel more connected while we work from home.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think it's easier now in some senses because we do have access to co-working spaces, whether they're formal or informal, in a way that we didn't in 2020 and 2021. So I think, things are improving, and I think there's more, there are more options out there precisely because of the pandemic and because so many people's working arrangements changed. What I think is difficult is the fact that we're still not very good about talking not very good at talking about mental well-being at work. And a lot of the well-being initiatives that organisations with remote workers engage in are quite performative, and not necessarily actually what people need, which is mainly true flexibility and the acceptance from higher ups that you can be very, very productive at home or working non-traditional hours. There's a lot of data that's come out in the last few years, which reflects that. As I'm sure you know, Anna Whitehouse and Mother Pucker have been doing a huge amount of work around illuminating the productivity gains that you get from flexible working. But I think one of the big challenges is getting organisations and the kind of working culture as a whole to accept that. I think it is being accepted in smaller ways in smaller places, but that's part of the mission. In terms of mental well-being, on an individual level, I think there are quite a few things that I could share. So one of them is just having a conversation with yourself about what you want your life to look like. I think for a lot of freelancers in particular, maybe less so for remote workers, but a lot of freelancers just do what I did. Put your head down, don't look up, and just work, without a very strong sense that the great thing about freelancing and some kinds of remote work is that you get to make choices. And often we make choices without realizing that they're choices. So we replicate the experience that we might have had in a traditional office environment, and we replicate the physical environment as well. We get a white desk and an office chair, and we work in a plain room, and we forget that we can kind of augment our experience. And there's data to show that people who live in in what are called enriched environments, so with your favorite art on the walls, or the colors that you like around you, and soft furnishings, and a comfortable seat, and natural finishes, and lovely warm textures around you, they tend to be more creative and more productive than people who work in a stripped back environment of the very traditional office type. But I don't know about anyone else, but when I went freelance, first started working at home, I basically made myself an office that looked like a real office in my spare bedroom. I painted it white, and I got a white table and a silver computer and a pen pot that was very office worldy. And so what I had forgotten was that I could create a space for myself that was actually really lovely and reflected my personal preferences rather than what I believed an office should look like. And there's really interesting data on that now, and quite a lot of stuff around the impact of having plants in your space. And I think that's it sounds like a really tiny thing, but actually it makes a huge difference, because you're spending often a really huge portion of your time in your working space, and so it does it does say something about the degree to which you kind of love and respect yourself. I think if you can create a really lovely environment for yourself, and also, I know people often don't have much space in which to work, and I worked at the kitchen table for a long time, but that doesn't mean you can't have nice things around you.
I often work at home and in my kitchen, and then I kind of berate myself for, not separating my life, and especially running a startup. There's little separation anyway, but so I completely, there's pros and cons, but what much to what you're saying, I completely hear what you're saying about kind of surrounding yourself with nice things and almost creating the energy that that will benefit you. So sometimes if I'm feeling super stressed or overwhelmed, I'll just get a candle and light a candle. And I don't know, it's just the ritual of lighting a candle, because I associate it with sort of, feeling calm and self-care, things like that. It really helps. So yeah, I can see the impact that those little things can do.
And we think that they're tiny things, and they are small, but their impact can be kind of exponential in unexpected ways. And I think if you're working in the kitchen as well, one of the tricks you can play on your brain is to put everything away, which sounds sort of obvious, like, oh, you should tidy up. And that's not what I mean. I mean, physically removing the work stuff from your home space when it becomes your home space again is quite powerful. And kind of closing a cupboard door or lidding a box or whatever it may be. I think those things, they make a really big difference to how we feel about our working day ending or beginning. Both of those things can be quite challenging for people. So I think it's odd that such tiny steps should be so important. But once I started doing them, I realized how critical they were. And then I started doing workshops for people. And they started emailing me afterwards and saying, that was the best tip. Like that one thing was really
Amazing.
great. And I was like, wow, it's 45 minutes of me talking. And that was the thing. But that's fine. I'm happy that there was a thing. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's true. And now, I didn't quite correlate it until hearing you say it. And I know that, it kind of data backed as well. But like you say, that separation, I think what I have just ended up doing, my separation from the working day, say, when my son kind of, has finished school and I'm like, right, I'm in mom mode now. And, I find myself doing things like changing the lighting it's weird. Like, so it's kind of like I'll put on, I'll turn on a lamp and I'll just make the place a bit more homely and cozy or something. So, and I don't know, maybe it tricks my brain into going, okay, we've stepped into a different zone now, but it's helpful. I think
it's huge. That stuff's really powerful, much more powerful than we would realize. I even like to talk about, like, those remote controlled daylight bulbs that you can have. You can have them on during the day or in your desk lamp, so that you get a good blast of kind of daylight light if you're not able to get outside. And then you can change the tone of the light later on in the day so that it's warmer and dimmer and cozier and more homely. And again, it makes a big difference because it sort of makes you feel like you're in a different space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know I want to make sure that we use all of this, like all of the rest of the time that we have, because I really want to hear more about your other book, Be Bad Better, How Not Trying So Hard Will Set You Free, because I haven't read the book yet, but even the title kind of, sort of suggests that it is something that most of us should read in this kind of, world of perfectionism we live in. So I'd love to learn more about this book and, what it's about, and any guidance and wisdom you can share with our listeners. The cheat sheet, so to speak.
Exactly. Be Bad Better is about all of the things that we're taught to think of as bad about ourselves, as I said, and why they're not. So it covers a huge range of things, from laziness and messiness and clutter, through to sadness, anger, negative feelings, having a bigger body, our bodies as they age, our faces as they age, the downsides of beauty culture, why it's okay to look ordinary. It's anti-consumerist, sort of, in the broader sense, because I think a lot of consumer culture is predicated on trying to make us feel bad in some way about ourselves, and then to spend money in order to feel better. So I guess that's a thread which runs through it as a whole, although I am keen to point out that I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty for spending their money in that way. I'm just trying to get us all to notice the moments in which we're being played, and then make decisions about what we want to spend our money or time or attention on. I don't have a kind of a view on what we each as individuals do in order to feel comfortable in our own homes and skins and ways of being. I'm just interested in the way that the messages have become very powerful and very loud, and very one note, about how to be like a good human. And so that's what it's trying to kind of bring to the fore.
Right. And how do you kind of deconstruct that in the book, or how do we as humans retrain our rewire our brains to not be such sheep in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I'm very aware when I have these conversations that it would be very easy to accidentally tread into kind of conspiracy theory type language, and I'm very keen to point out that it's not that. I think, well, so basically the way that I deconstructed it in the book, literally from a structural point of view, was I divided it into 3 sections. The first section is called Doing Bad, and that's the bit where it's about the upsides of laziness, the upsides of clutter, where the messaging came from that told us that, you know, to be tidy was to be morally upright and correct, where we learned to be perfectionistic about the interiors of our homes and our bathroom cabinets as much as we are perfectionistic about the way that we look or the way that we work. And then the next section is called Looking Bad, and that section is about having a bigger body, or the ways in which we've been messaged and taught to think that we should always have a small body, and why that might be. And then there's a chapter on aging and the upsides of aging, and why we've been taught to think aging is so bad for such a long time, hundreds of years. And then there's a chapter called Looking Ordinary, which is about beauty culture and the way in which various different interest groups from the beauty industry on have conspired basically to make us feel that we need to look a very particular way and that we need to buy lots and lots of products in order to do so. And then the last section is called Feeling Bad, and that is about so-called negative emotions like sadness and anger and anxiety, and the very good and inevitable ways in which those feelings will appear in our lives, and why they're necessary, and why we shouldn't fight to hide them or to squash them or to numb them, even though we're taught in this particular culture in which we live now that to be sad is a terrible, terrible thing, that we should be happy all of the time, and that if we just try hard enough to pursue happiness, then it's achievable and feasible, and that everybody else is happy, so you should be happy too.
Yeah, which is such a toxic message. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
How for you personally, have you noticed any differences in yourself, or how you, your your inner kind of your inner chat, or in how you kind of view things, having gone through the process of writing this book?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's lots of different areas in which it's changed the way that I think. I very much am a recovering perfectionist, so I wouldn't say that it's managed to. I would be delighted if writing a book had managed to get rid of that particular aspect of my personality, but it didn't entirely. But it has made me think differently about the degree to which I have expectations of myself and my behavior and my abilities, which are kind of not from me, and not really real, and can be rejected. And I think of particular relevance to your community, like parenting has been a very big part of that for me. Like, I had very high expectations of how I would be as a parent, and I think having IVF before that also sort of raises that game. And I'd been taught for a variety of reasons, from how I was parented myself through to how we kind of construct a narrative of parenthood culturally. I'd been taught to think of parenthood and motherhood in particular in very specific ways, and I have only very recently been able to sort of detach myself from that and start thinking about, what my personal capabilities really are, how much I can do with my kids, what I may be good at, what I may not be good at, the ways in which I can sort of forgive myself for so-called failures. It turns out I'm quite a shouty parent, and I'm not very patient.
Join the club.
Yeah, exactly.
You're welcome to the real world, the real world of parenting. We all thought it would look different than it does. Yeah,
totally. But I just think these conversations are really worth airing in public, because I'm not sure that new parents often have access to that kind of idea and information. And I was parented in a very different economic environment by a mother who really wanted to stay at home, but economically could do so. And so she was at home for the first 8 years of my life. And then I had a sister who, was also parented at home. for that whole period of time. I went back to work. I went back on live television 5 weeks after my first child was born, wearing 2 sets of breast pads and maternity underwear.
Oh, wow.
Because for a variety of reasons. One, maternity pay was at that point £168 a week, I think, which was not anywhere near enough.
Mm.
Also is the amount you get, I believe, on universal credit at the moment, which is, again, not enough to parent. And because also I just had this notion that if I didn't say yes to everything still at that point, that the ground would swallow me up and I would have no more clients and nobody would ever want to work with me ever again. And, you know, that tension between what we expect, particularly of women, but not only, what we expect of women who are working, but also mothering, like, I just don't feel as though we've resolved that. And quite a lot of the book reflects this idea that, you know, we haven't really rearranged the way that we set up families to operate since the 1950s, even though the way that parents work is fundamentally different now. Like, we still
Yeah.
behave in terms of expectation, in terms of what a school might expect, in terms of what we culturally expect us to do as parents for our children, in terms of teaching them to read and doing their homework with them and shipping them to loads of different clubs and all of those sorts of things, and being very present and being very involved in their lives. We're doing that almost as though we've still got a full-time member of that adult household at home all the time.
I could not agree more. It is so, and I have one child, my 7-year-old son, but it's overwhelming the amount of, like, it should be. I feel like I need to, I saw actually someone, some meme going around, which really resonated recently, which was, I'm giving up. I'm resigning from my job to focus on reading my kids' emails from school full time.
Yes,
Which
yes,
did you see that? And I was
absolutely
like,
that.
oh my God, accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is a perfect example.
Mm.
And I feel like I could totally do that. I could absolutely have a full-time job that would just involve dealing with the school app, dealing with school uniform losses and gains,
Yeah.
and and arranging and paying for clubs, activities, and birthday parties.
I know.
Like,
And because I am a self-saboteur extraordinaire, I am class rep this year, just
oh my
to
God,
throw in
wow,
another challenge into the pot. But yeah, it is.
that's brave.
Oh, I know. Well, I'm halfway through, but I completely agree with you with the parenting thing, that we haven't yet recreated how it all works. And
No, we haven't adjusted. Like, I just find it extraordinary that we haven't adjusted working hours. We've made them longer. We haven't adjusted the way that childcare operates. We've made it more expensive and harder to access. Like, we are expecting more people to work more hours for less money often. People are really pushed to get together an income on which they can survive.
yeah,
And yet we're still raising the bar for what we expect a parent to do and to look like.
yeah,
And I find that tension so extraordinary. And
it
it's
is.
and that isn't, by the way, an argument for like women returning to the home and not working. This is an argument for subsidized childcare and lower working hours
Yeah,
and more flexible
completely.
working arrangements becoming the norm. Like, I'm not for a second suggesting that the move forward that we've made in terms of women's access to the working world in particular, I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing. It's a very, very good thing. It's just that we have to have a conversation about what that does to families, particularly families who have, for whatever reason, a sort of, I don't want to say like a non-traditional setup, because I hate it sounds pejorative and I don't mean it like that, but like, there are so many different arrangements that people have these days, and that's brilliant, but we again haven't made any accommodation for that. We haven't made any
Well, that's
accommodation for how people really live now, which
exactly.
is
and
baffling.
and yeah, and one of the things that the majority of single parents struggle with, and I can say that because we've surveyed, we've surveyed this within our community. Overwhelm is such a big issue, and
Mm.
single parent stress and single parent overwhelm. And of course, that then trickles into to everything. So yeah, it's definitely important that there is more balance,
Mm.
more balance. So I know that we are almost out of time. So I would love to go back to the kind of original thing we spoke about, which is your food writing and
Mm.
your cookbooks. And
Sure.
just, again, just thinking about, our listeners and the Frollo community. I can speak for myself when I say I am just constantly looking for inspiration for quick, healthy, affordable meals to cook for me and my son. And just to
Mm.
throw another kind of challenge into the mix, he's a super fussy eater as well. So I'm just wondering if you have any brainwaves if you have any brainwaves for single parents to have just kind of easy, affordable, healthy meals. Any ideas, any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, the fussy eater challenge is real. I have one too. I think anybody who's dealing with a fussy eater or just children eating should know that a cookbook writer of many years standing also really, really struggles to find food that the entire family will eat. I mean, the number of times when I cook two or possibly even three meals, or three variations on a meal, so that everybody will eat it is it's countless.
Oh,
My
wow.
husband refuses to do it, but I do it because I just want people to eat and be nourished, and it's very important
Yeah.
to me that they are. But it's insane. So I think just to reassure people that is even I've got an encyclopedia of recipe ideas in my head, and yet I still end up doing the same 5 things on rotation for the kids because they're just so hard to cook for.
Oh,
But having said all that, my inspiration type things are one pot meals. So I do a lot of tray baking. By which I don't mean sweet things, I mean savory. So I am a massive fan of things that you can do on one tray or in one pot in the oven. Or indeed in the air fryer, which I've recently invested in, and just is a game changer for cooking small meals for small people. So I've really got on that sort of trend. But so I do lots of things like baked curries, like mild curries. I think they work really well if you've got a kid who'll eat that kind of thing. So you can change up what you might put in it in terms of who eats what in your household. But a one that I find has worked well is fillets of salmon basically baked in a coconutty broth. So you can
yum.
put you get a high-sided tray, you get some fillets of salmon, you pour in a tin of coconut milk, and then you add some roughly chopped lemongrass, a couple of slices of ginger, a bit of turmeric if you fancy. You could add well, it depends really what kind of direction of the world you fancy going in. But I would do sort of, turmeric, maybe chili if your kids are into it, but maybe not. Possibly like a little pinch of cumin, some black pepper, some finely sliced garlic. You could put a couple of sliced shallots in there, and then you can bake the whole thing. There's a recipe for this in my book, Leon Happy One Pot Cooking.
That
Um,
sounds incredible. I
but you can
am
also
like
do it with
suddenly starving.
yeah, exactly. But you can also do it with chicken. You could do it with crispy tofu. You could do it with, you can do it vegetarian completely. You can put some pak choy in there. You could put a handful of green beans in there. They'll cook in the broth. You could put in some leftover potatoes if you had like some boiled new potatoes in the fridge from the day before. You can change it up, and it's very quick. It's about 17 to 20 minutes in the oven at about 200. And you can do it with a whole fish if you'd prefer to do that. If you want to do something a bit more fancy, I've done it with like a sea
Very
bass.
fancy. Yeah.
Depending on your kids and their kind of appetite for exploring new foods.
Mm.
And then you can just have some rice on the side, or you can even cook it with noodles in the broth if you wanted. You could just put a couple of handfuls of egg noodles in the broth, as long as it's deep enough, and they'll just cook down in it. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. But I also love doing things like sausages with white beans and rosemary and a few half cherry tomatoes, and you just whack that in the oven. You can do that with like spicy sausages if it's just for you, or your kids are older and up for that, or you can do it with garlicky sausages, or you can do it with Cumberland sausages or vegetarian sausages. There's so many
It
different
sounds
permutations.
so good. And what would, if there was one book that you think would be most helpful to the Frollo community in terms of inspiration, like this one cookbook of yours, which one
So
would it be?
probably the one I just mentioned, the Leon Happy One Pot book, but there's
Yeah.
also a Happy One Pot vegetarian book as well. So
Okay,
if you're
great.
a non-meat family, then that should work out for you. And yeah, the recipes are short, easy. They're all with like 99% with ingredients that you can easily find in the supermarket. And obviously, in particular, the vegetarian one, the costs are really quite low, because Leon, the restaurant group who I do these books with, are, they're very keen on being egalitarian, but they're also sort of heavily plant-based. So there's an awful lot of pulses and seasonal vegetables and things which are good value if you can get them at the right time of year. So yeah, that's I've really loved writing those books, and they're the ones that people give me nice feedback about still, sort of years later
Oh,
after they came back. So that's really nice.
there's an order about to go in now. I've been influenced. I'm definitely excited.
That's the kind of influencing I'm into. I'm not into influencing which has to do with face cream or how to make a contour. But if I can help people have a nice dinner, then I'm up for that.
What's your favorite restaurant in London?
Oh, that's so difficult, because it so
Or
depends on what you
just
want.
or just one that maybe is one that is kind of accessible, not super high, kind of, not super expensive, hard to get into, just something that for anyone who's visiting London or lives in London and is looking for a top tip from a foodie like yourself.
I mean, so I guess I have two that come to mind. I mean, there are so many, but I went for something really sort of fancy and exciting, but also expensive. So like very much, this was a kind of, I think it was a birthday treat that we went, that I went with a group of friends to a place called Mountain, which has a brilliant chef behind it, and is like really kind of innovative and exciting food. If you're up for sort of a bit of, like, it's not mad food exactly, but it's kind of, it's quite bells and whistles. And I really loved the space, and it's not fussy or poncy or anything like that. It's just kind of really cool and feels kind of Scandinavian, and
Fab.
which is really nice, but that is quite expensive. The one that's probably a bit better value, and a really nice one if you're visiting London, I really love Brasserie ZL, which is just by Piccadilly Circus.
Oh yeah, I
It's
know it. I've never eaten there. Yeah.
It's it used to be amazing value, but then hello, cost of living crisis, and now it's not as cheap as it used to be, but I still really like it. The room it's in is really incredible. There's a lot of gold and marble and sort of, jazz playing softly in the background. Sometimes there's a pianist, and
oh, lovely.
The people who work there are always really friendly, and it's quite huge. So as a general rule, it's not too difficult to get into, and you sort of feel like you're in one of the hotel dining rooms of the 1930s or 1920s or whatever. It's got that vibe to it, and it's French food. So yeah, I definitely I recommend that one. It's a really nice place.
Thank you so much for the top tips. And yeah, I think this might be the most wide-ranging conversation I've ever had on the Frollo podcast, in a brilliant way. It's been amazing. We've explored so many avenues. I love it. But thank you so much, Rebecca. It's been really, really lovely to chat with you and learn more about your work, and I know that all of it will be interesting to our listeners as well.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, sorry, I've got such a weird career that you end up getting off in strange zigzags whenever I talk to anyone. Yeah,
it's fab. And where can people find you?
So I'm mosely on Instagram in terms of social media, which is at Bexseal, BEXSEAL, or my website, rebeccaseal.co.uk, has information about all my different weird and wonderful books, and I usually post my articles there too.
Fab. Amazing. Rebecca, thank you so much. And I know that you're going to be doing a meetup on Frollo as well. So we'll organize that and we'll post the details in the show notes as well when we've released the episode.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time. And that's a wrap for this week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, then I have one small favour to ask. Please can you take a minute to subscribe to the Frollo podcast and give us a rating and review. This really helps other single parents who might benefit from it find us. The Frollo app, which is fully user verified for user safety, is available on the Google Play Store and the App Store, and you can find out more info and download links at www.frollo.com or follow us on Instagram at Frollo app. And you can purchase your copy of our book, How to Be a Happy Single Parent, at all the major book retailers. Until next time, have a great week.